I want to introduce my guest, Reginald Penn.
Good evening.
Good to see you, Brother Colin.
Good evening.
Yes, Colin O'Neill and Brother Michael Anthony. Yes.
Good evening.
Cool. It's good to see you. I got to light up y'all. I got this. I feel like I got this high-powered panel.
Okay.
It's like I'm kind of beside myself. But we're gonna get right into it. We want to talk first about government services and what it means to business. And I want to go to a clip first, and let's see what some of the members of the business community has to say about government services. And we're going to come back and we're going to talk about that and discuss those services and how we can improve them and what other services need to be added. Watch this.
I mean, as a business community, I think most people pay their taxes, and I find that we do not have the support of, say, the public sanitation department, solid waste department in assisting to keep the environment a little cleaner in the business community, etc. Yes, people are responsible for their home and residence, but when you're talking about, say, Wickham Ski 1, where you walk around and the place is just outright dirty and unkept, and bad lighting, poor lighting, which is a problem because everybody knows we are in this situation of increasing crime, and we need our government to further assist by making sure there is proper lighting, we take care of the environment, the sidewalks are cleaned and swept, etc., and maintained, and more efficiently using our public sanitation people, the solid waste department, to assist us in doing so. I think we need to step it up on that area.
The work permit process. It takes forever for us to get employees. In my business, I have pharmacists, and it takes sometimes like 2 months to get a pharmacist on duty. But there are a lot of different things. Cleaning up the road town, the city. I see business people putting their garbage out hiding in the middle of the town. That needs to be addressed. We need to depoliticize a lot of what happens here in the BVI. There should be efficient processes in place to conduct business. If you know what the policies and procedures are, time frames, workable time frames, just an efficient process. It takes too long to do everything, and time is money. If your goods come in, it shouldn't take forever to clear your goods, okay? If you need to do business at some government office, it should be done efficiently, okay? And if it's not being done efficiently now, then we need to examine the processes that are in place, the procedures, the policies, and fix them. I think that's what we need to do. Yeah, just acquiring a trade license. They can never tell you exactly what the process is, what the procedures are, so that you can follow them. And it changes from individual to individual. These things need to be depoliticized. And what's been happening too, if you're dealing with one of these agencies and it doesn't work out, it's taking too long, you go on to a minister. We need to cut that out. In these instances, I don't know that there are existing processes, but in those cases where there are none, they need to be, and they need to be followed. And if they're not followed, then you need an avenue for redress, like you said. I know you see these notices where small businesses can't put their trash in the regular bins. I support that. But I think there should be somewhere, area where, commercial small businesses, can put their trash and really utilize that service. Because, like you said, they pay taxes as well. We pay taxes. And we ought to be benefiting from several other services. Because not every small business has the resource, a truck or, the funds to have somebody pick up their garbage. But if there was a bin for commercial use, just like there are residential bins all over, they wouldn't have to take the garbage all the way to Parkwood Pond. They could just utilize that bin, load up their car, whatever, and take it to that bin, I think businesses deserve that.
Yes, government services. I don't know, maybe start with you, Reggie. How much of a role should government play in terms of sanitation, for example, as Ms. Vanderpool mentioned, keeping the town clean, and we could also add to that the smell and a reliable source of water, for example. Those are some other issues.
Well, those would be some of the services that we entrust to our quote-unquote government, the people who run these services. Clearly there's a role for each person, and each business person and each individual, to keep his little area clean. But in terms of providing services and facilities for the disposal of waste, in terms of keeping the place clean, in terms of improving the infrastructure, fixing broken, whatever, and that is a role that in most jurisdictions, most countries is played by a government. And I can't say, that we are doing a stellar job in that area, and we certainly need to do a much better job there.
Okay. What's your take on that one aspect, Colin, and the other issue of the bureaucracy and its efficiency?
Well, I support what Reggie has said. Clearly, that's essential services like waste removal is basic to government. But if I could just touch on something that Nona was alluding to, the whole issue of services and processes. I was fortunate to have been chairman of the Public Service Commission many years ago, at a time when the different departments were introducing service charters. And at that time, the service charters indicated, or included rather, time frames for certain processes to play themselves out. So these things are there, at least on paper, but clearly they're not being the facts on the ground are at odds with what's written on paper. And if there's nothing else that I would want to say this evening, I think it's this, that business, more than anything else, in order for it to survive and thrive, needs an environment, an enabling environment in which to operate. And part of this relies on what Nona was calling for, efficient government processes where you have reasonable time frames which are known to the consumer of services, and against which you can judge efficiency, and if you fall short, a complaint can be lodged through the proper channels because these standards haven't been met.
And this all falls, excuse me, Crum, I've got that here, under the whole umbrella of customer service. When someone steps into the business place of any of us, they expect to receive prompt, courteous, professional, responsive service, and the government has to play the same role because they're in the business of serving the public, and so their customer service should be exemplary.
Okay, Mike, you want to put in?
Hearing that communication seems to be the missing factor. Proper communication of what is in place, and then the second to that would be a more detailed look at how can we bring more efficiency to the process that is there. And I think what business persons are looking for, in as simple as a thing as garbage pickup that Ms. Vanderpool mentioned, if you know the particular times, the schedule of when there will be garbage pickup, there will be a shorter period of time that thing is exposed to the public. And that has to do with our cleanliness, it has to do with our decor and the general presentation of the town, because I know there was a big push recently to make this, a little town with a big heart or something, and really keep the image of the city on a very presentable level. So
Right now we don't have any standard times for garbage collection. Garbage is collected haphazardly. I think.
we're not aware of anything. That's what I'm saying. Communication is important. Communicate what is in place, and then we can look at what is in place, and then look at the details and see how we can adjust it, because people will be happy to know when a certain event will take place, and you can plan around it, and you can take the appropriate steps. Right now, you basically put your garbage out and hope somebody picks it up that night, and so it's left open to vandals, animals, all that kind of thing.
The government bureaucracy seems to have, or I should say our civil servants or civil service seem to have challenges understanding things like efficiency, in some instances understanding things like courtesy, in a lot of instances afraid to give out certain types of information that is needed for you to make an informed decision. Is there something that the business community can do working in conjunction with government to help to improve that relationship and improve that efficiency and quality of government service?
Yes, there is. Any relationship survives on effective communication. And either the government departments or the business community under some umbrella group or, in some group would take the step forward and say, let us talk about the issues that are common to all of us for the greater good. And once the communication starts, I'm seeing a lack of effective communication, and both sides share an equal part in that lack. And I think the thing to do is to facilitate communication, because once we get talking, we can work through what we perceive to be big issues, and sometimes it's just a matter of clearly understanding.
Colin, is the private sector or the business community falling down on their responsibility to establish open and good communications with the public sector?
I don't think so. I think that service standards are concepts that are well recognized in government. Government has an entire training division in place where these values ought to be inculcated. In the same way that we as business people don't let loose a new hire onto the sales floor or in the office, the same methods, training methods, slightly different training methods apply to the public service, but as a general principle, the issues are the same. It's about training against established standards and making sure that your management apparatus is in place to monitor and make sure that your line managers and your frontline staff are all in compliance with your standards. I don't think the business community is falling down in that respect at all.
Can business put more pressure on government to meet those standards that you're talking about?
Yes, we could, but I would like, before you go on, I would hasten to add that one does receive in some areas of government, excellent service, customer service, and I would like to put that on the record, but what we're saying is it is not as uniform as it should be. It's not as uniform as it should be, and our desire at all times should be to be the best we can be. Best practice is the buzzword we hear today, and certainly we have a long way to go in so many of government agencies and departments to accomplishing that.
As businessmen, y'all have the same challenges as Ms. Vanterpool with work permits and trade licenses and various other licenses that you need to meet your business requirement, whether it's you're doing marine business, real estate business, all of those licenses and channels that you have in the process that you have to go through. Are you meeting inefficiencies, particularly in getting things done in a timely way to meet your obligations? Are those challenges that y'all are having as well?
Well, I could say personally that we have actually had an experience that it's taken us just about 2.5 years to obtain a license, actually a CBED license, something that should have taken place in a matter of a few months. I mean, was very disappointing, very unfortunate, and that's something that ought not to be repeated. No one else should have to experience that.
I think not only are we experiencing the difficulties, but I think even more problematic is that there's great inconsistency in the application of standards and rules and regulations within the government departments themselves. And I think that inefficiency in terms of time is one thing, but when rules and regulations are unevenly applied so that you don't know where you stand legally, I think that signifies an even greater level of dysfunction in government.
So then what Ms. Vanterpool says about depoliticizing the services, it has merit.
Absolutely. And the fact that in so many instances, a politician has to decide whether something is done or not done, whether it's granted or not granted. I mean, there should be a level playing field. There should be standards that are clearly articulated and they're applied uniformly to everyone.
My final question on this this clip, is that an indication though that the business community lacks organization and power? Because in all other countries in the world, the politician is afraid of the businessman, and here's the only place where you see the businessman afraid of the politician.
I think that might be a fair observation here in the Virgin Islands. I think
I think it's a matter of what we're saying is the system. If we have a proper running system, then everyone is empowered. You understand? So if the things are put in place in the system, if the system runs the way it was supposedly designed to run, then everyone is empowered, because the business community is empowered because you have efficient use of your time. The government services are empowered because the more efficient the business community comes, the more we can produce and put into the system, whereby default the government always benefits, because the more we produce, the more widgets we produce, the more man hours that we have that are productive, it leads right into the government coffers directly in a lot of cases. So the whole system needs to be streamlined and run in the way it was supposedly designed to run, and everybody gets empowered from that. And then once everyone is empowered, there would be no fear factor, because everybody clearly understands their role and know that me helping you and vice versa empowers all of us.
Okay. Anything else anybody want to add on to that?
I would just say that I think the perception that the business community lacks power is due to the fact, or born of the fact, that we have been, in the BVI, been conditioned to think that all favors flow from the government. You are allowed to do something. You are given permission to do the other thing. There isn't sufficient appreciation, I don't think, and this is something that I am actively working on, to try and get people to become more aware of the important role that business plays in the well-being of all of us. And
yes,
this is what Mike was saying. It is our business activity that generates much of the revenue that this country is run on. And it's business people like us and those coming behind us, I think, who have to get the message out that what we do has value. Listen to our voices. It's in your interest.
Okay, we're gonna go take a look at another clip, business development and sustainability. Business is all important.
That's so true.
Business is all important. I think this is going from the government services and leaving off from what Colin just said. Business development is right. A great segue. So let's take a look at this clip.
The government could provide financing or back loans for small businesses. The government can offer technical expertise. I think for the most part, people starting businesses think that what they need is money. Everybody thinks they just need money, but a lot of times, I would say at least 50% of the time, it's not money that people really need. They need a technical expertise, because I could keep giving you money. If you don't know what to do with the money, your business won't be successful. Okay? So we need to look at the technical expertise. We need to, have business consultants hired by the government to help businesses survive. If they need marketing, we create, that environment where they can get that type of assistance, that type of technical assistance. A National Business Bureau? Well, I know we have a small business committee that I don't think it hasn't started as far as I know. I think their plans are great to assist small businesses with the backing of, small loans, creating accessibility to, national programs, and I think it would be a help to small businesses if it comes online. Yeah, I think you said National Business Bureau, but whatever it's called, an agency that understands the importance of business to the community, and more specifically small business, small businesses to this community.
Yes. The development of small businesses, and whenever we talk about government assistance, it's always couched in the context of assistance to small businesses. Big business don't need any assistance. That's kind of inference there. No, and we want to talk a little about that. The role of government in developing business. Generally, business, for those who don't know, provides food, clothing, and shelter for the members of the population. Business provides the jobs, business provides the goods and services, business basically, to a large degree, responsible for the quality of life that we enjoy. So you could almost say that business is generally all important. I mean, government really has a limited role.
It really is, and what I'm thinking of, Cromwell, is that government cannot grow if business does not grow. For instance, if you have a steady stream of business closures, then the revenue streams just from custom import duties dies along with those business closures. Government revenues are directly effective. If you have enough negative growth in business, then government also goes the way of the business. So it's a direct relationship. We cannot underestimate the importance of viable businesses. And when the government presents the picture of the territory overseas and the per capita income, the rating of one of the best places to live and one of the best places to visit, and the ambience and all that, that is driven by business and marketed by our government. But the lack of a viable business environment across the spectrum, whether you call it big business, small business, across all sectors, real estate, tourism, hospitality, retail, all business make what the territory is that's presented to the world. And we need to keep that primary in focus, because if business dies, government dies on the same percentage that businesses die.
And the community, obviously.
Obviously.
I mean, that's what recessions and depressions are made out of.
Right.
Cromwell, from my perspective as someone involved in property rentals, I can attest to the fact that the entrepreneurial spirit is alive and well in these islands. There is no shortage of persons who would like to begin little businesses and such. The problem, as Nona pointed out, one of the major problems is a lack of expertise, to make that a sustainable business. And the government definitely has a role to play there. I recall distinctly that a few years ago, when the Small Business Bureau was established, it conducted several seminars. I recall many of them were held down at the Old Prospect, and they were very valuable and very well attended. And that sort of business advice and acumen and consultancy is sorely needed, and I think that it would be a very good idea to revive that, the National Business Bureau, whatever, so that not only can people desirous of starting small businesses do so, but that those businesses would have a better chance of success, of growing and ultimately becoming big businesses.
The total government role, though, I mean, we talk about starting small business, and Nona talked about facilitating financing and helping businesses to get off the ground, and technical training and marketing and so on. But medium size and big business, what role you see government playing in the development of medium size and large business?
I have a live experience for you. Clover's launched a branch in the U.S. Virgin Islands in May this year. And in the U.S. Virgin Islands, the government has an agency called the EDA, the Economic Development Agency. That's a branch of government solely dedicated to helping startup businesses, small and medium businesses, or whatever size, to get on your feet. And they don't just name it. They sit with you, they go through your business plan, your cash flow analysis, your projections, your vendors, your product offering, your marketing, and the sessions are free, as much and as many as you want and need to get your business going. And they provide long-range, low percentage financing. What I'm saying is that sort of thing encourages business growth, because you recognize that obviously would help. And we had, as Mr. Penn was saying, a small business bureau, a small business agency, and Ms. Vanderpool spoke about a National Business Bureau. And these things, again, are invaluable to us. And I would like to see that sort of effort revived, no matter by whom, because, again, the empowerment flows across the table. Once we empowered, once we get that sort of thing, it's good for all of us.
I think that I agree entirely with what both Reggie and Mike have said with regard to more established businesses and how they not only how they grow, but how they continue to survive and thrive in the current environment. I think that one of the things that's sorely lacking in the present situation in the BVI is the availability of current information with regard to your local market demographics, and that's to say nothing of the potential overseas markets for your products or your services. And while we've had a small business bureau, we have a trade and investment department, we have certain aspects of development being addressed directly out of the Minister of Finance's office. There isn't that one clearinghouse where all of these things can be pulled together, so that it's really, again, to use a phrase that's becoming overworn, is that the environment isn't very enabling for businesses to get the information that they need to have in order to build their business. And I think fundamental to business growth is information, particularly information about your market, your existing market and your potential market.
I think another critical role that the government has to play here in terms of the viability of local businesses is supporting them and giving them opportunities when they come up, and giving them a fair opportunity to bid on whatever contract that might be offered to provide whatever goods and services are needed, and giving them a fair shake. And I think we have a celebrated recent incident here involving a huge contract where that wasn't necessarily the case. And see, that has a spin-off effect, because it sends a message out to other would-be entrepreneurs that perhaps, if I grow and make a huge investment, maybe, when the time comes, I won't get a fair chance. And that's a very, very vital role that government has to play. Support your local businesses. I'm not saying that, you give them an unfair advantage necessarily, but at least give them a fair shot.
An opportunity.
Exactly.
No, I didn't know that Clover's, and congratulations, I didn't know that Clover's had opened up a store in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and because that's the sort of thing I've been thinking about for a long time, and wondering when our businesses, and I think of Bolos and Dentapools and Clarence Thomas and those types of businesses opening in Caymans or Antigua, or and having the government play a role in looking into those various markets to see how to do business, what are the laws and the regulations. Is that something that would be a part of a business bureau or the government business development strategy?
Well, it's important to note that in U.S. Virgin Islands, just about every major chain has a branch there. So there must be something attractive in that market, why they all established there. I even saw Hooters there. I remember when I lived in U.S. Virgin Islands, in Florida, that they had Hooters. But getting back to the BVI, we have to look and learn and see, what can I do to adjust myself to raise my level of the game? And it takes openness of mind. And I will hit this all night, that empowerment of me is empowerment of yourself. If you try to hold all the power, then all the power goes as you go, and there is no spread. And for a successful community, society, there must be a spread of empowerment, technical expertise, as Ms. Vanterpool mentioned in the clip, availability of services, knowledge of what is there. The empowerment goes a long way, because people are out there, especially the next generation, they have very, very good ideas, but turning those ideas into the reality of a successful business, a successful contribution to the community, that's what lacking, that knowledge.
The other thing that, following on from what you said, Mike, the whole issue of empowerment, I think that there's a hesitance on the part of some of our leadership to do that. I have a friend of mine who started a business here and started operations. He applied for license to do the same thing in St. Thomas. And as a British Virgin Islander, it took him, he got his license quicker in the U.S. Virgin Islands than he did in his own homeland. and there's no reason why that should be the case. It can only be explained by the fact that someone here has an interest in perhaps delaying the process or applying a level of due diligence which turns out to be counterproductive to business, but it certainly didn't enable it. And I think that that's one of the things that we need to get past. Licenses need to be issued to British Virgin Islanders as almost a matter of formality, as long as it's not in, dangerous professions or things like that. But there's no reason why, this kind of gatekeeper's approach should continue. It's one of the things that's holding us back. Particularly young people, they need to be freed to express their entrepreneurial drive.
Would you be in favor, any of you be in favor of a BVI Islander going down to the Trade Department with his passport, filling out a application for a business, as long as he's 100% owning it, and he's got proof of his belonging status, issue it right there on the spot.
And Joanka, I will give you again my personal example. When I was in college in Florida, I walked into, between breaks and classes, I walked into the licensing division there in Tampa, Florida, and 20 minutes walked out with my license to do exports. All right? 20 minutes.
And I had a similar experience in New York.
Okay.
During my lunch hour, I became a
Empowerment.
businessman during my lunch hour.
Exactly. In 20 minutes, I was empowered because I have the entrepreneurial spirit, and I needed an opportunity, and the facility was there, and you pay your taxes. So there you had the state of Florida having a foreign student paying taxes into their government system because of the facility to empower you.
What do you think about the whole idea of going as a BVI Islander with your passport to the Trade Department, filling out your application, getting your license on the spot, pay your $50 and getting your license on the spot?
Well, of course, they would need to do some degree of due diligence and a bit of a background check, perhaps. But certainly, we can expedite the process a whole lot more than it is expedited right now. And I think if you're a Virgin Islander, and so long as you qualify, yes, it's something that should take very little time indeed.
A computerized check. You punch in the data, run a check on them. That's good enough to go. The BVI Islanders, they're local, they're tied here. If something comes up down the road, put a catch-all phrase in the thing and say if in 30 days or 90 days after our due diligence, then we will shut you down if we find something. But don't stop the process. Time is money in business.
Okay. You want to weigh in on this before I go to the break?
No, I fully support that. And again, the only restrictions that should be placed on a British Virgin Islander getting the licenses are formalities. If it's a specialized trade like welding or things that require particular expertise, I think that a government has a right to be satisfied that we're not turning people loose in trades
The safety
professionals.
issues.
The safety issue primarily, yes.
Okay, we're going to take a break for a word from our sponsors. We're going to be right back with more Spotlight. We're going to talk about import duty. That's a big issue throughout business, been an issue for years, and we're going to have some discussion when we come back. Keep it locked right here to Spotlight.
This program is sponsored by the law firm of J.S. Archibald & Co. and by the trust company J.S. Archibald Trust Services Limited, both of Roadtown, Tortola, BVI.
Welcome back to Spotlight. We are having a terrific discussion here with Brother Michael Anthony, Colin O'Neill, and Reggie Penn, and we're talking about business views. We're talking about what business would like to see happen in the community, particularly in light of the fact that we have a general election coming up on November the 7th, and going forward with our new administration, we certainly want to make sure that it is understood that business is what makes a mayor run, as the old people would say, and all of the quality of life that we have relies on business, and also we want business to understand its responsibility for the quality of life of the persons in the community. So it's a symbiotic relationship that all of us share as Virgin Islanders, and all of us need to make it so that it is a success. We're going to go to the clip now. If the import duty is a big issue, a big business issue, a lot of the businesses credit import duty for its lack of competitiveness, particularly across the region, its inability to compete with the U.S. Virgin Islands in particular. And so we want to know what we can do about that situation, and how, and if and how import duties can be reduced or reorganized and restructured in some way. Take a look at this.
I would love to see government doing a situation with duties where we can maybe even come up with a two-tier tax system in the country, because government will still need to maintain their revenues, and a fair amount of revenues come from import duties. But I figure a two-tier tax system for licensed legit businesses, and no freight, no duty on freight, because right now we pay duty on freight, whether it's inland freight in the U.S. to get it to the port, or ocean freight to get it here to the islands. We're paying duties on that also. Get rid of the container surcharges that went on goods many years ago as a temporary measure that somehow or the other seemed to stick, because people need to understand that all these charges are going to be passed back on to the consumers. So we have to find a way to actually get rid of those charges and make sure that the businesses are passing the savings on to the consumer. Now, for me, I know, and I can tell you, I can hear some person saying it already, oh yeah, you guys are going to take that money, you're going to pocket it, and nothing will get passed on to the consumer. Well, that's where legislation comes in. Legislation enforcement. Government needs to make sure they have the proper legislation in place to go along with such reductions. And they need to make sure that they're holding our businesses accountable. So if CTL is not passing on savings to the consumer, then government has a right with the legislation, that the right to come in and fine CTL until CTL actually falls in line, or any other business for that matter, falls in line, and make sure that those savings are actually passed on to the consumer. Because what that would do for us, it would actually, believe it or not, would shift the tide of persons leaving the territory and going to the U.S. Virgin Islands, and you might actually shift the tide and actually start bringing people from the U.S. Virgin Islands to the BVI to shop. Because we did the math already, and if we get the reductions on duties, we can lower our prices and still maintain our margins by upwards of 15, in some cases even nearly 20%. Which would make us extremely competitive with the U.S. Virgin Islands. But enforcement must go along with whatever incentives government is going to be passing on to our local businesses, because you want to make sure that the population benefits from the incentives.
I couldn't go along with duty on the invoice. I thought you were asking, do I want to say lower rates? Don't charge us duty on, especially since freight is linked to fuel on pricing, and when fuel escalates, it escalates the wrong cost. So drop off the insurance, drop off the freight, drop off whatever other, I think it's they call it CIF, just charge us on the cost of the invoice. Cromwell, whatever savings I get, I usually pass on to the customer. Everyone is not the same. It may not be a bad idea for government to mandate it, whether through some form of a price control, So if government give me, let's say, insurance is 1%, freight is usually, depending on the type of products, 10 to 20% of your product. If government give us that sort of a break, they should be expecting at the retail level especially a similar reduction to the consumers as well. I agree.
One of the first things I think they need to be looked at is the import taxation that is levied on businesses, certain businesses more than others. For example, in the pharmaceutical industry and medical industry, which I'm involved in, you find that you're paying 10% duty on medication, prescription medication. You're paying 20% duty on things of necessity such as toiletries. And I think government needs to review those and give some concession on. You can't have someone with high cholesterol needing to be on medication all their life and have to pay 10% duty on that medication. There should be concession, just as how it's done for antibiotics and other medication. We should consider reducing that duty on a broad spectrum of prescriptions. I would beg to differ on that as a responsible business person, and I think there are many of us here in the territory. I believe such savings would be passed on in our establishment. We would definitely, if you're not including taxation on freight, insurance, etc., then that will not become a part of our cost. And so we'd be able to pass the savings on to our customers. And this we do whenever we are able to. People will look back and see sometimes our prices are reduced because we had a saving in terms of the cost of the volume of shipment that we had. So we were able to reduce prices. So our prices don't necessarily stay constant irrespective of what we were charged for freight. If it's less, that savings is often passed on to the customer. I am not sure how regulation would really affect that, and if it would probably be more of a hindrance in terms of how do you legislate that. I don't know. I guess we would have to examine the process of bringing about this legislation, what will be involved. So, but I believe if the duties are reconsidered and reduced, in general, I believe business owners will pass on that savings to the consumer. Similarly, in the medical area, if we bring in stuff that are medical equipment, you pay 15%. That is the duty attracted to medical equipment. Now, the strange thing about if it's surgical, it's 5%, and I can't see why the discrepancy, because they're all for the same purpose of delivering health care to the community, and there should be one percentage, the same percentage of duty, if any at all, to be put across the board, be it surgical or medical in nature.
We have to compete with the U.S. Virgin Islands. I think the duty structure needs to be looked at. I think it needs to be brought into the 21st century. We may want to look at a two-tier system where if you're purchasing goods for resale, there's one duty on that. And then if you're purchasing as a consumer for personal use, there's another duty. The things that people need should be duty-free. For instance, foods, healthy foods, medicines. There's a 10% duty on life-saving medicines. Now, there are some medicines that are free, like antibiotics. However, there's some drugs that you have to take for the rest of your life. Cancer medications, those aren't free. And I think those should be duty-free. And you could probably increase the duty on luxury items to compensate. But the things that we need to survive, I think they should be duty-free. And I'm not talking about the junk foods, because they're usually a lower duty than the healthy alternatives.
Yes, quite a lot on the import duty. Should you only pay duty on the invoice?
Well, Kwamal, I believe that we will find general consensus across, the business community in the Virgin Islands of the need to reduce import duties, and of course the specifics of how it's done and which particular charge will be removed, or this freight, that could be worked out. But there is consensus on that. The big challenge, of course, and we heard it also in the clips, is the fear that if this were done, how do you ensure that the businesses will pass it on to the consumers? Because that must happen, in order to realize any real savings and benefit from that. And I think this is where consumer protection legislation could be used. I think that businesses need to be held to a higher standard as well. We must deliver what we promise and give excellent customer service at all times. And I think that perhaps this could be embedded in consumer protection legislation, the mechanism for the enforcement of passing those savings on to the consumers.
Okay.
I agree in principle with what the clips, the persons in the clip said, and what Reggie said. But again, I think that we also have to be mindful of the cost to government in any net reduction in duties collected. I mean, customs duties account for a lot of revenue, and they're going to, if they are reduced, the shortfall is going to be made up somewhere else. And I think we have to be very deliberate in our considerations as to where that is going to be made up. Is it going to be is it going to be done through increased costs for certain services, or are we going to have to pay school fees to go to our schools? The money is going to have to come from somewhere, and particularly in a time like this when government revenues are already challenged, I think that we have to consider not only our interests as business people, but the overall cost and benefits to the country in taking or not taking this step. It may, as I said, you may have a net fall in revenue, which may affect your schools and other things. So, in principle, it's good, but the revenue is going to have to come from somewhere else.
You have to be careful. You have to be careful with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was thinking along similar lines that for instance, the 1% wharfage you pay, obviously the port needs that to operate. And as far as reduction in duties, I think that on freight and insurance, that needs to have a serious second look, because it's sort of counterproductive from a business standpoint. And duties in and of themselves, generally, I think we need to look at volumes in determining duty rates. You understand? So not only classes of goods, but volume that the country that
so
comes in nationally.
You have a progressive rate, a graduated rate. If the more freight you bring in, you get a discount on duty.
Again, that's something needs to be looked at more in depth. But in a umbrella sort of look right now, I would say duties could be based upon volume, because there are some consumables that come in every week. There are some that come in seasonally, and there's some that are critical to, like healthcare and to sustain, what they call it, the staples, to sustain life, to sustain health, to provide dwelling places and things like that. So we need to look at the volumes, though. I think they need to get the data together and look at the volumes and then determine the rates based upon the volume and the importance. Of course, the importance include things like needs and how critical it is to us as individuals and the country. But to directly cut off the revenue stream would be counterproductive. Again, it's across the board. If we cut off the revenue stream for government, we in turn suffer, as Colin was alluding to, by the social services and the infrastructural needs that government does and has to provide.
The idea mentioned by Ms. Vanterpool about increasing the tariffs on the luxury items to make up for the shortfall on the reduction in tariffs on the staple items. What do you think of that idea?
But the thing about that is that's a good first step to look. But I think added to that, you need to look at volume, or how determine the class of luxury items, and then look at the volume and the frequency of importation of those things, because you may raise the duties on luxury items, but then
it's not enough in volume.
The turnover is near to zero or less than 5% of total importables all year. So then it would be counterproductive to government to raise the duties on something that is such a small percent. So we need to look at volume, and it needs a really hard look. That is something that needs long study, lots of data, and deep consideration before we adjust. When we do adjust, I want to say before, when we do adjust the import duties.
But I think that the challenge of making up for the revenue that could and probably would be lost, by reducing import duties, brings into focus the challenge of any group who would run the affairs of our government, of finding new and creative sources of revenue. And this, of course, we're talking about diversifying the economy, and finding sustainable, credible avenues for doing that. I think we need to be putting a whole lot more attention on that than we are presently.
I think one other thing that we need to recognize is that, generally speaking, import duty rates in the BVI are low by comparison to many other places in the Caribbean. Very low. You lower them even further, of course, there is a risk of revenue shortfall. But perhaps you could do that if we also at the same time took a more focused approach to enforcing customs collections. I mean, everyone knows there's a culture of customs. Let's say avoidance in the BVI, and we could perhaps lower our rates marginally once we all agree that the cost of doing that means that we're all going to have to comply with the regulations and stop things like getting export invoices from your suppliers which undervalue the cost of your goods and things like that. Again, we want to have the benefit of facilitating business, but we also have to impose some discipline on ourselves to show that we're worthy of these concessions.
Now, the whole competitiveness issue with the U.S. Virgin Islands, for example, that some estimates that we have say that approximately $75 million a year goes out of the country to the U.S. Virgin Islands, and that's mainly as a result of the expense of doing business in the BVI or buying those things in the BVI as a result of the tariffs. That is how important is that in the equation?
We want to understand something about shopping in the Virgin Islands. In the U.S. Virgin Islands, it's a novelty. It's an experience. So there is that intangible element to it that no matter how low your prices go, I'm not discounting the fact of the importance of lower prices in the equation, but in the equation of a consumer deciding to go to the U.S. Virgin Islands and or Puerto Rico or Miami to shop, but primarily the U.S. Virgin Islands because it's just a ferry ride, there is the intangible novelty of getting it, the experience of the trip, and it's just part of our culture. And so we as business persons cannot ignore that factor, as well as we cannot throw the whole weight of the flow of business to the U.S. Virgin Islands simply on government rates. Because you have to also negotiate, knowing that you're doing business in the BVI, negotiate with your vendors. okay? And once again, it comes to business people getting together and empowering themselves. Maybe you can do volume buying as a group of businesses, and therefore your negotiating power with the vendors becomes greater, because you get more than one store location. All of a sudden vendors pay more attention, so you can negotiate better rates, because obviously your volume is going up, and once volume is going up, any vendor is going to pay you more attention. So there are a lot of things that go into the equation when you try to retain more business here. Obviously you have to keep the quality of your product up, step up your customer service, step up your marketing and your information, and do special incentives so that people will see the benefit of shopping more here. But I want to state that it can never be quote unquote stopped, because that novelty, that experience is one that each one in the BVI, and a lot of the people that come to live in the BVI, they want to have the experience of having gone to the U.S. Virgin Islands. So we don't want to discount that. I also want to say one more thing, Aduenka. Back to duties. If we, in the very first clip, Mrs. Vanterpool spoke about lighting in the Rotong area. If we can have more public-private partnerships, even if it's not the Chamber of Commerce, but say the Rotong area businesses, as a group, get together with government and do a public-private partnership to light Rotong. Maybe the government can say, if you would source the stuff, we would waive the duties or the wharfage or whatever, and do a big public-private partnership in light Rotong. Maybe we need to look at that, and that way the goal can be reached, because we all again are empowered, because the lighting brings a certain measure of security, not 100%, but it certainly does a lot for the tourist environment and our own safety. And I see something that can be done right there, in the good of everyone, in the common good.
The two-tier tax structure that was mentioned, where legitimate businesses get a lower rate than the individual who's just going to shop for themselves. What's your view on that, Colin?
I frankly hadn't really given it much thought, but I think it sounds like something that could work. However, it will entail almost a whole new level of bureaucracy in order to manage it. I mean, how are you going to manage it? You will need some sort of Bureau of Consumer Affairs in order to protect the interests of the consumer. You will need customs to be involved, and perhaps other agencies as well. It's not something that can be established overnight without causing chaos in an already inadequate system.
So the general consensus is that yes, perhaps the import duty tariff structure need to be changed, but it need to be studied carefully so that it doesn't have adverse impacts on the economy.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're going to look at the other clip. We're going to talk about the wholesale-retail relationship. That's something that people have, some persons have a lot to say on, especially small businesses. Let's take a look at this clip.
And we purchase the majority of our products from the bigger guys, such as the Rotong Whole Sales, the T-Codes, etc. What I would like to see is that there is some level of price control, because not only are we purchasing from the bigger guys, we in a sense we are competing with them, and it's, for example, I may buy a case of something, and the bigger guys are selling it, for us, they can make their markup smaller. They might be selling it for 75 cents, where I might have to sell it for $1. And the same guy I have to buy from, is now come on, Peter, wait on me. Maybe what the government could do is, force force them to break up, or maybe where they, even if they run it themselves, where the retail section is a separate entity, and they would have to buy at the same rates as us, the smaller businesses, so that we can be at least as competitive as them. For example, I'm in a consumable business, fuel, drinks and snacks, and etc. There is not a whole lot, especially when the business is so small. There's not a whole lot you can order to really be competitive. I mean, we order as much as we could from outside, but when you take in consideration the shipping and the volume you have to order, it doesn't make sense. Almost, certainly, we most times order stuff from right here on the island. So it's just about regulating it so that it's fairer. It's a more level playing field.
Issue of wholesalers having retail stores and competing with the retailers that buy from them. What's your take on that? Reggie, Colin, anybody?
Again, if you had a division of consumer affairs and then consumer protection legislation, that can be wrapped into that whole scheme of things. I realize that a lot of the retailers that end up in that position have been raising that issue for a number of years, and this is not the first time I've heard it. And it would be really a good thing if the powers that be would take a closer look at it and see if there is some way they can bring a meeting of the minds, because obviously the numbers are involved. We do not want anyone to go out of business. So the larger businesses and the smaller and medium-sized retail businesses, of course, that are their customers, we all want them to survive. So I think that is, again, something we need to take a realistic look at, and it takes a certain level of maturity as a business community to come to the table, quote unquote, and say, listen, this is something of common interest and concern. Let us see how we can have a meeting of the minds and work so that we all can live in a profitable manner.
Should wholesalers be allowed to retail at all?
Well, again, that would be one of the things that would be at the table.
What's your thoughts on that, Colin?
I don't know how effectively you can stop it, because a wholesaler can establish a separate entity to do their retail, and even you may not even know it. In that the ownership structure could be set up in such a way that it's hard to see the relationship.
Should you regulate the prices that a wholesaler can sell in his retail store, where there's a minimum above the cost that he has to sell it for, so as to level the playing field? Some such thing, I don't know.
I think ideally yes, because if you don't have that clearly, the market dominance, the ability of the wholesaler to also dominate the retail market is always going to be there, and always pose a threat to the potential growth of smaller retailers. They will never be able to get beyond a certain size because they are essentially buying their source material from their competitors' wholesale arm. I wish I had the answer, but short of, again, either regulating it in some way, which is not easy to do, I think you're always going to have this problem. And I think in the BVI, it's arisen, through sort of historical peculiarities, which we all are aware of.
I think it's a very delicate matter that has to be, especially in a small community like this, but clearly it is not the healthiest of situations to have that, where the wholesaler can literally dominate the market. And,
But we've had several instances. We have several instances in the community, and there's a constant complaint. It seems as though something is begging to be done. Whether we have to study it a little bit more, well, I don't know how much you would have to study it. The fact is that you have companies, wholesale companies with retail outlets that are selling to retailers at a higher cost than what they're selling in the store. I mean, I've had the personal experiences. So
I think it's good that the issue has surfaced, because I think it's just recently that we've started actually publicly dialoguing about it. You know, I think this came up through the political campaign actually, and I think that it's a good first step. I think that we need to go on from there and try to convene meetings between some of the persons who are involved in this activity, you know, and the retailers and the wholesalers, you know, and at least have some dialogue among them and see what, you know, can come out of that, and then see what course of action then the government should take in terms of trying to deal with this issue.
Okay. We want to open up the phone lines. I think now would be a good time to open up the phone lines. And so when we come back from the break, we are going to open up the phone lines and the text, and you can, and the phone number is going to come up on the screen, and you can call us and talk to us. We're going to come back. We're going to talk a little bit about development agreements and investment, whether local investment versus foreign investment, does it matter as long as it's investment, and what we need to put on the table when we are attracting investors. Can we continue with the same pioneer status that we had to implement in the 60s in order to attract business investors, or do we have the market now, and do we have the international recognition where investors are pursuing us, and therefore we need to use that leverage to benefit us ourselves as a people? Those are some of the issues we're going to look at when we come back after these words from our sponsors. Keep it locked right here.
Spotlight is brought to you by CCT Global Communication, DataPro, Orion Law, Clarence Thomas Limited, Virgin Island Motors, and Bolo's Wholesale Cash and Carry.
Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm Edwinka, and if you haven't been watching, you know, you missed a lot. You had some great discussions and some great information. I've been speaking with Michael Anthony of Clovers, Colin O'Neill of Joma Properties, and Reggie Penn of HR Penn Limited. And we've been talking about business in the BVI and how we do business, what we need to do business better, and the importance of doing business in the Virgin Islands. So the number is going to pop up on the screen momentarily, and you can get in your calls or your texts. I'll be happy to answer questions, and here you go. Let me see. Where are we? Okay. Is grouping to import goods to lower food costs, which Giant Rotom Wholesale is not doing? Do you support an exemption on food and medical products and all other products? Who do you suppose should lead the way in changing the way garbage is handled, business or government officials? What do you think about small food businesses? Okay, let me take the last one first. Who do you think should lead the way in changing the way garbage is handled, the government or business?
I think government. That's the job of government. We pay for that.
Okay. So businesses are paying to move their own garbage right now. So they're not benefiting from the taxes that they pay from that particular service.
It's a matter of proper coordination, because you have garbage. The government is just quote unquote streamline the garbage collection process, in that there are more collectors than there were before. So therefore, that should automatically lend to more efficiency in the system. It's a matter of coordinating the services and the resources that are there and that the government is already paying for. And I think scheduling it, and that has again to come from government, would be a big factor in helping in that area.
Okay, let's go to the phone. Thank you very much for calling Spotlight. Go right ahead, please.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The issue that most of the panel made about the reduction in duties being affecting the government coffers. I think if you could make a dent in the amount of money that's spent in the USVI as a result of lowering the duties on certain items and reducing them on certain items, it would, the revenue that the government is losing, it would offset the revenue government is losing by lowering the duties by the amount of money staying here as opposed to being spent in the USVI. I mean, nobody knows what we really spend in the USVI. Let's say it's $50 million. Let's say you could cut that in half or even a quarter. If you have another $10 million circulating in this economy, it's got to be better than the amount of revenue the government is going to lose by that money staying here and circulating among ourselves rather than going to the USVI where it benefits nobody but the people down there.
All right. Thank you, my brother. That's an important point. Let's get a response.
Well, one of the things, on one of the clips, it was mentioned that in reduction of duties, there also need to be put in place measures by government to be sure that it's passed on to the savings is passed on to the consumer. And obviously, we want the dollar to turn over more often in the BVI market. Right now, a lot of time it's just turn over once. That's at the ferry company when you purchase your round trip ticket to go to St. Thomas, and the rest of the money goes to St. Thomas. So we want to see more turnover here, which again empowers the business community and the BVI and the government and the people as a whole. So if the first step is to reduce the duties, we have to make it a complete package by also ensuring that reduction spreads to the consumers where the higher turnover in dollars is realized in the BVI market. So it's a multi-pronged approach to get that done.
Well, I think that the caller is absolutely correct that reducing the import duties would redound to our benefit here, and that it would make many of our local businesses more viable than they are now because they would have greater volume.
Yes, increase in internal volume would make up for the shortfall in the duty. That's the premise.
Yes.
Is that because Colin, you seem to be concerned that might not work as well as it sounds?
Oh, I agree. Again, as long as you're doing it based on some sort of empirical study and not just a hunch, because if you do lower it and it does not result in the results which you hope or you anticipate, then the whole exercise would have been counterproductive. But I generally agree that if you lower any sort of tax, people are going to spend their money and increase business activity in your territory. So yes.
Thank you for calling Spotlight. Go right ahead, please.
Yes, that's the same caller that called earlier. I want to use an example. In St. Thomas, in the USVI, some time ago, the duty on tax on fuel and gas at the pump was 14%. The legislature passed a bill, they reduced it to 7%. It was 14 cents, and they reduced it to 7 cents. And in the law, the way the law was written, it was mandated that the gas station pass it on to the consumer. So one day you go buy gas, and the tax on the was 14 cents a gallon, and the next day when you go, after the law went into effect, you saw the tax was 7 cents. They had to pass that savings on to the consumer, and it was in the law. And so the apprehension that Mr. O'Neill has about businesses not passing be legislated that they do, and if you have the proper authorities to enforce it.
Right. Thank you very much for that call.
Okay.
Good night, guys. Wharfage is charged twice. It's calculated in the CIF, which is then multiplied by the % to get the duty. Then it's further added to the duty again as part of the final duty, and that's wrong. You guys familiar with that?
That's correct.
Well, that's a statement for your representative.
What do you think about price control on basic food items, eggs, rice, flour, sugar, milk? Price controls.
Those are the staples.
Yes.
Some of the staples, and again, volume. Alluding back to what was mentioned earlier, a deep look at the volume is one of the major factors in determining any adjustment in dutiable rates. You need to look at volume, not just because it's a staple, but you need to look at volume and the effect across the board. You see, all of these suggestions and ideas, there's some good in the ballpark by themselves, but when all the players take the field, then the whole economic picture is affected, and then you keep hearing all night, both on the clips and from the panel members, that studies needs to be done. These are not overnight. You don't get up tomorrow and make these changes, because they will have far-reaching results, whether positively or negatively. And sometimes, if you lower a tax, it is suicide to go and raise that tax. So you better have a pretty high level of assurance that you're making the right step.
Good evening. What are the guests' take on tropical shipping being a monopoly? Does this affect cost of consumer goods?
Well, I don't think they're a monopoly. I mean, there are other shipping companies from the United States, as Crowley, for instance, and.
But they are the main player. They have a considerable amount of the market. Cornered, being that Crowley is a recently a fairly new entrant. Is that having an impact that they have established themselves in the market to the degree where they can charge almost what they want?
But then again, in any market, people go towards product and pricing. So the competitors of tropical just have to work within the market, and once they bring a competitive offering, then business would go that way, because businesses are not about throwing away money.
And also, they don't ship from the same port, so it's it's not always possible to use one as opposed to the other.
No, and this brings us back to the business bureau or some sort of agency to facilitate the development, the growth and development of local business. In that we have a couple of local companies that are fairly good size. I think it's the Starline, the Chadwell brothers from East End. They have 2 good sized boats that go to Puerto Rico and other Caribbean islands. Facilitating their development to that level to go to Miami, for example, and bring some competition, some local competition to tropical shipping. What you think about an idea like that?
Excellent idea. I mean, and again, that's a role that the government could play in trying to facilitate and to some degree, encouraging that kind of cooperation, and pooling of resources in order to compete more effectively.
And it's something that's doable. I mean, I know that Tropical was started really by a construction company that was shipping materials, their own materials, from Miami to the Bahamas, and then started using containers on small ships and grew. And there's no reason why our shippers couldn't with government assistance in terms of, exploring what it takes to do it logistically, and perhaps with some sort of support behind them, take that next step to invest in larger ocean-going vessels to make that Miami trip.
And Joanka, this comes back to one of the earliest points you made in the show. Why should we have a mindset to remain just local?
Exactly.
Why can't we go international? Why can't we go, step at a time regional? And then encourage our next generation. I take it regional, empower the next generation to take it international. I mean, I always look at the fact that the international groups, they have branches here throughout the region. Why can't we empower our people to think globally and rather than just locally? But we will never get there if we don't get rid of the mentality of fear. If we have an atmosphere where intimidation and fear rules the day, they will never reach their potential.
But there's a role for government to help to mitigate those challenges that may arise in the regional or international market, and that help would build the confidence in the business person to move forward. I got a text that says, what is stopping us from creating our own shopping mall and novelty, one east and one west?
There you go.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Just
the vision to do it,
Just ourselves.
And again, the vision includes again having those who would run the affairs of the government. Again trying to bring that about. Throwing it out and actively, supporting the idea.
Okay, let's go to the phone. Thank you for calling Spotlight. Go right ahead, please.
Hello.
Yes, go right ahead, please. You're on Spotlight. Good night.
I have a question to ask you about inland freight. Let's suppose I go overseas and I buy something, and the company from which I buy charges me, say, $50 to deliver it to the port. Then, when I come to our ports here, I have to pay import duty, a percentage of that on the invoice also. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yes.
That I'm charged freight, like if the boat charges me, and I have to pay 10% on CIF, and that's including. Don't you think that is a little unfair?
Yeah, in essence, you're paying both freights. You're paying the ocean freight and the inland freight, and again, it's something definitely for review. That's worthy of being reviewed, and to see where some relief can be given there. Within the context again of, being mindful of the need to replace that revenue somehow in the government's coffers.
But also be aware of the fact that businesses pay on the same structure, the same dutiable structure, just on cost, insurance, and freight. Businesses pay. So you have a choice in shopping. If you decide to pick it up locally, maybe you can negotiate a discount again with the local vendor. Or take your figures to the local vendor and say, hey, I can pick this up for $50 and then pay my 10%, cost, insurance rate, and it cost me $55 landed. You have it priced at $60. Why can't you give me $10 difference and I pick it up for you for $50? The money stays here. I realize a saving. And one of the things about shopping locally is that you save time.
And I usually figure aggravation into
time, frustration, aggravation. But time, the most, if you could get something locally, the time it takes you to get it externally is so much more valuable to you. You could spend that time locally investing in doing something else productive.
Well,
And at the end of the day.
I want to cut in, please.
Go ahead, Carla.
Yes.
No, I'm not talking about something that I can buy locally.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
this is how I shop if I have to buy something overseas. First, I make a call. I am fully aware of my local prices.
Okay.
And I'm not going to buy something overseas that only costs 10% more than what I can buy locally. Because I have to consider first to begin with my call. Somebody has to pick it up, put it on the boat. I have to pay the boat. So if one it only costs 10% more than what I'm going to pay here, that's out. So I'm not shopping for something that I can get locally. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying if I have an opportunity to shop for something here locally, I'm not going to waste my time. I'm going to get it locally and save time. I know that, but I'm talking about getting on a commodity that is not made here, is not found here, and I have to import it to do my business.
Well, I guess as you said, Reggie, it's something. Those are things that all need to be looked at as part of the tariff structure. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you very much for calling. And we also got to take in mind too, I think, when we are shopping overseas, the importance of dollars staying in the territory and the multiplier effect, and the businesses that have those employees that pay rent, that buy food, that we need to keep our community alive and vibrant and thriving. And so I think that's an important consideration. I would pay up to 25-30% more for the item in the BVI for that reason, along with the aggravation of going to St. Thomas or Puerto Rico. To me, it's an aggravation. So if I'm going away on vacation, I'm going away on vacation. But to go to another country to shop is an aggravation. It's an aggravation. There's an aggravated factor involved there somewhere.
But the time factor in Duinka is very important to us as a society, because if you have a few hundred people leaving your shows every weekend, then those people cannot be part of the athletic system, the social programs, the activities that we do as a community. So suppose on Fisherman's Day, everybody goes to St. Thomas, and the fishermen coming in, there's nobody at Beef Island, so and this is where we live. So there's a social factor. There's a social factor involved. Social factor involved.
Let's go to the phone. Thank you very much for calling Spotlight. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, good trip, gentlemen.
Thank you, my brother.
Hello.
I think that the duty structure should be two-thirds. And I know you were discussing earlier how difficult it could be to implement. I think you might be able to implement it by trade license, meaning that if you are a car dealership and your trade license entitles you to sell cars, then I don't see why we should pay the same duty on bringing those cars as a regular person. Most developed countries already have a structure like that. So your trade license actually has some value. You certify to the business and you bring in cars. Nobody should be able to, for lack of a better word, beat you at that part of the game. And so it's an incentive for people to buy cars locally from your establishment because of the structure that you have set up. You pay taxes, you have people hired. So I think trying to get it done by trade license also makes the trade license have some value. Right now I think that we have some challenges where the businesses and the taxes that the businesses pay. If I go to St. Thomas and I buy something, there's no way the businesses can compete with my price, and I just put it on the ferry and don't really pay a shipping and don't really pay all those taxes, and and that creates tremendous amount of leakage. But I think that we could regulate it by trade license. What are your thoughts are? Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much for that call. Any thoughts on your trade license? You get a reduction in tariffs.
The concern again would
And
be
we passing that on to the customer, obviously.
it's a worthy idea, but again, the concern would be, the challenge would be to put mechanisms in place to avoid abuse of the system.
Okay. Trade licenses for local, in reference to trade licenses for locals, walk in with passport, documents, etc., and get license almost instantly. What about those who continue to front for outsiders? The fronting issue about with getting your instance license.
Well, again, you don't want to discourage people with an entrepreneurial spirit and in all investors. I think was mentioned earlier that on the back end, if there would be a catch-all, for lack of a better terminology, a catch-all phrase or terminology in the granting of things speedily, so that after we finish our due diligence, that you know that you can lose this within 90 days, 30 days, 60 days, 1 year, whatever the framers of that legislation or that policy would decide is in the best interest, so that even if it's fronting, you know that we're going to catch you on the back end and that you're going to lose it. So
enforcement becomes a critical point
so
there, so that you have people inspecting, making sure, and you also have a fronting policy, because we don't really have a fronting policy.
That's true.
We don't really know what a fronter is.
Right.
And so we need to have a fronting policy in the first place, so that we have some criteria to measure whether someone is actually fronting or not, and then have the enforcement mechanism to prevent that.
Or is it just legitimate investment where you provide the finance, I provide the expertise? It's a marriage.
So we have to have some clear definitions.
We have to, yes.
I see that we found on the tyranny of the clock. We live in a jurisdiction of free enterprise. We have to be careful of over-regulation.
Right.
Let me see, HWC went free for locals and is now operating at a deficit. Losing import duties may cost the same for the government. Okay, that's a comment. Anybody wanna? The whole question of regulation. There are some business people that are concerned about over-regulation.
I think over-regulation is potentially one of the biggest disincentives to investment and one of the biggest hindrances to operation of a successful business. But we've been talking for most of the evening about things like changes in customs policies and other things which affect government revenue and government's operations in a significant way. These are all approaches that I think we support, but I think we recognize that they come with a huge potential for abuse, and that's why you need effective regulation. I don't think any of us want to see, a huge new thick layer of bureaucracy on top of what we already have, but it needs to be efficient. And it has to be not only in the interest of us as business people, but also in the public interest.
Yes.
Yeah. Good governance is becoming increasingly critical in this whole equation as well, in making sure that efficiency is in the government and minimize abuses. So I think that's an area that is going to become more and more important as we go along. From a business point of view, why an adult is from 12 years and by law it's 18? It's 18. Kids that being in chat. I can't read this language. This is the new text language that a little old. In chat, adults fears for. Nah, I can't manage it. I don't have time to decipher it. Would you agree that increasing consumer import duty at the ports on items that are sold locally at reduced prices as a result of government's initiative to lower import duty for business owners? Don't quite understand that.
Quite get that.
Don't quite understand that either. Don't want that. It's time to go. We fall under the 10 o'clock. What about taxing the monies being exported from our country every week? That's quite interesting. Is that no? That's an interesting question. I guess in the financial services sector, monies are constantly leaving the country, or monies are leaving the country as persons send money to the other countries, remittances, and so on. And if we put a tax in, say, what's the name of the company? Western Union.
Yeah.
Is that a doable thing?
I don't think it is. It's for one thing, remittances is one of the means of support that a large percentage of our population, rely on. Their folks back home, their families rely on that. I think there are legal issues as well as far as that's concerned. And if you're talking about remittances, tax and remittances of companies doing business here, I think that's something that, of course, you can do it, but the ramifications might be
unthinkable.
Unthinkable.
Yeah, we might just be accused of ring fencing again.
Exactly. That's the issue.
You can't do
two different standards.
It sounds good. It's something I've thought about and raised sometimes, but when you really look at it, that's quite a serious issue. Yeah.
It's time for us to have cost control, like a cost control unit here, and we need a couple of malls. That's one of the reasons why St. Thomas does so well. We need cost control and malls. Is that what we need?
Well, I think the time is long due for some entrepreneurs here to get together and build a mall.
Build a mall.
Yes.
Yeah. Colin, we need back Miss Maduro at Port Purcell. Cost of food is high. We need one of those food courts. Oh yes, Miss Eunice Maduro, who lost the store in the fire. I heard quite a few people saying that food prices gone up since Miss Maduro got burned down. Matter of fact, they even thought that it was willful. You know how our mind works. Mr. Anthony, why does it seem like the guests are running around the question? For example, the question was asked about price control, and the question was not answered. There is no need for a study to understand there is a need for pricing control. It is a simple decision. Mr. Anthony is speaking about local shopping. However, most of the stuff is greatly overpriced. Most of the local stuff is greatly overpriced, and we're trying to determine the cause of the overpricing. The cause of overpricing that we have greedy businessmen, or the cause of overpricing the cost of doing business in the BVI, including the shipping and the tariffs. That's what we've been trying to talk about all night.
Well, overpricing is a perception. The reality in doing business is on the numbers. It might seem overpriced, but if you buy for 10 and I buy for 15, obviously there's going to be a difference in price in both our offerings. So once again, these things are not just one-off answers, but there's several factors that go into pricing, that goes into offerings, on determining when people do pricing. So one of the factors that go into it is the duties and different taxes that come to play in any market. So it depends on the market and the sources.
You're saying that many of us business people sometimes don't look to get a better deal, or don't realize that we are buying from retailers when we buy goods to sell in our stores. And such we are not getting the best price that we possibly can, because we are not buying from the right vendors.
So sometimes you don't have the buying power
to get the best prices.
The better prices, yeah. So again, it comes to volume.
Okay. We followed until 8 o'clock. But I have to say I enjoyed the discussion thoroughly, and it was a great discussion. And I can't thank you guys enough for coming by, and some of you on short notice, some of you, in your busy schedules, coming by to talk with us about business, what we need to be doing, the way we need to go, and some of the issues surrounding us getting better prices, better service, and having a better quality of life. I thank you guys very much for being my
I thank you very much for the opportunity, and I've certainly enjoyed the experience.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Continue to tune in to JTV Spotlight at Channel 55, Tuesdays at 8 p.m. and Sundays at 4:30. Check for the special editions of the Spotlight on the candidates Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Please pay close attention to the words and the actions of the candidates. Don't assume you understand what they are saying. What you don't know, have them clarify. I'm just issuing a warning that the English language is kind of tricky. So you gotta pay close attention. So I want to thank you for your words of encouragement, your suggestions and criticisms. Continue to email me at jtvspotlight@yahoo.com. I'm Eduenka, reminding you that when the spotlight is on, you see the facts. Peace and blessings.
Spotlight is brought to you by the National Bank of the Virgin Islands, the Radio Doctor, Tortola Concrete Limited, and Varieties and Electronics.